We're fine. Everyone, we are fine. We are totally fine. Everything's okay. So we're back in a corner here in this huge concrete building, and you see this is where I was going down the stairs and whatnot.
To say that the last few hurricane seasons have been wild is a bit of an understatement. We've seen anywhere from tropical storms to Category 5 hurricanes making landfall all in one season sometimes. When you think of hurricanes seasons, a lot of you may think of 2017, 2020, even 2005. However, in 2023, for the first time on record, we've had an active El Niño hurricane season, or a hurricane season that is very active during El Niño. And considering the pattern change and the fact that we're looking at a lot more global sea temperatures continuing to warm up, this begs the question, what will 2024's hurricane season be like, and how bad will it get for a lot of you in the Caribbean and the United States? We're going to go ahead and explain all the conditions that are going for this, and then give a bit of an early estimate. So here's what we have going on. We have starting right here is the global sea temperatures. Back in 2023, we were at record high global sea temperatures, not just in the North Atlantic, but across the world. We were at its peak. We were at 25.4 degrees Celsius for much of the North Atlantic, which, for those of you tuning in the United States, is about 77.7 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the average spread across the entire North Atlantic Ocean, rather. And even still, we are still seeing a lot of the global sea temperatures continuing to be abnormally warm, and that's rather disturbing for several reasons. First thing is because the Caribbean Sea was not impacted by any of these hurricanes. What hurricanes typically do is, other than cause a heaping path of destruction, they also cool a lot of the waters due to upwelling and a few other factors. The global sea temperatures that we have right here across much of the Caribbean, well, a lot of them have been rather concerning right here. They've been near record highs for December and January, with a lot of areas of 28 plus degrees Celsius or 82 plus degree Fahrenheit temperatures across parts of the central and western Caribbean Sea over here. And we saw a whole area of pretty much the entire Caribbean being that warm all the way into December, and the loop current is still as warm as ever, 26 degrees Celsius at this time of year. So that's what we have going for it. We have parts of the main development region where these things really start going up as high as 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, with really not much cooling it down. And another thing that we're taking a look at right here is for the 2024 global sea temperatures so far, they have been they've been rather off the chain, and they're still rather about 0.3 degrees Celsius or so warmer than than what we were looking at previously. And considering that the fact that a lot of the Caribbean is untapped, come springtime, we're going to start seeing those waters start warming up again, and we'll go ahead and show you the anomalies that we have pulled up right here. According to some of the climate models that we have, we're going to go ahead and shift to the North Atlantic region over here and show you the kind of anomalies that we're forecasting, especially during hurricane season. So here's what we have pulled up. This is the CANSIPS climatological model right here. We're also going to be showing you the CFS and the NMME if they support this right here. But as of right now, in January 2024, the forecast anomalies are across much of the main development region, even into the Gulf of Mexico, are as high as 3 degrees Celsius above average. So going into February and then March and then April, as the waters start to warm up, those anomalies continue to be rather concerning, to say at the very least, and we're going to have to continue to pay a very close attention to this. And then by the time hurricane season starts in June, the anomalies are going to be pretty much universal across much of the Atlantic Ocean, especially in the tropical Atlantic, where we're seeing anomalies as high as potentially up to 2 or 3 degrees above average. And considering how warm the Atlantic Ocean was last time, that's pretty concerning to say at the very least. Because let's say because if we have the average right here, the mean average is about 25.4 degrees Celsius or about 77.7 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're seeing an extra few degrees, above average, and we're still seeing parts of the Atlantic warming up. We could run into a scenario where these systems will have potentially more fuel than what they had last time, and that was during an El Nino year, so that already in itself is pretty concerning to say at the very least. But this isn't the only thing we're paying attention to. The next thing we need to pay attention to is the wind shear, but before we get to that, we need to kind of talk a little bit about about something that we're potentially looking at, and something that's pretty concerning to say at the very least. This is the ENSO pattern that I'm going to have pulled up from the CANSIPS right here, and the reason I have this pulled up is because between now and pretty much into the summer of 2024, we're going to start seeing a situation where we're going to have the El Nino completely fall apart. This El Nino that was the strongest El Nino since 2015 completely just collapse and then transition potentially into a La Nina by the time we get to peak hurricane season. In fact, already the forecast is calling for, by September, there's already an over 60% chance of a La Nina happening, and a potentially pretty strong one as well, as we continue to show you some of the climate models coming up. So, based off the NOAA forecast, the ENSO is expected to transition into a neutral phase between April and May. Although there already is some good indicators of what we're potentially looking at, as some of the areas and some of the zones have already started to transition into a neutral phase already in January, so we're going to have to keep a very close eye on that as we continue to show you this. We're going to show you the CANSIPS, and this is what happens right here. This is the El Nino right here, which essentially means we have warmer than expected global sea temperatures for parts of the Eastern Pacific Ocean, and what that also tends to do is strengthen the trade winds across much of the tropics, which is why you don't see as many hurricanes in the Atlantic, and you see an increase of hurricanes in the Eastern Pacific. Well, last year kind of broke that because what we ended up having is the global sea surface temperature anomalies, especially in parts of the Atlantic, absolutely just demolishing what the El Nino was giving right here. And what we ended up having to deal with was, in some parts of the Atlantic, we were looking at anomalies of up to 5+ degrees Celsius above average in some of these areas, which That is already really scary to look at based on a climatological perspective. But given the fact that this absolutely just demolished whatever the El Nino brought, was another thing out in the ballpark entirely. And now we're going to go ahead and show you what we're looking at. And this is the even scarier part as this transitions into a La Nina. By next month, according to the CANSIPs, those sea surface temperatures and anomalies really start to fall apart as the ENSO cycle starts to kick into a La Nina pattern. And by March, we're looking at several areas of at or below the average right there, and we're looking at more and more of these areas looking around the neutral phase as we continue to take a look at this. And then, as we continue to get into April, we already are seeing some potential signs of that La Nina really starting to fire up as that upwelling really ramps up over the winter. And we're seeing sea surface temperatures now in parts of the eastern Pacific over here exceeding 2 degrees below average. And you're probably saying to me right now, Patrick, what are you talking about with the South Pacific? You're talking about the North Atlantic hurricane season. What does this have to do with it? Well, remember when I said an El Nino strengthens the trade winds and it causes less hurricanes in the Atlantic? Well, what do you think the La Nina does? It's pretty much the opposite of what we're looking at, where what the La Nina ends up doing is it just completely weakens the trade winds and allows more hurricanes to organize and strengthen in the Atlantic Ocean. Remember what we saw back in 2020. 2020 was a La Nina year. If we go ahead and pull this up right here, if we can get that taken care of over here. This is what we were looking at back in 2020. In 2020, we had a relatively strong La Nina with pretty much a sea surface temperature anomaly in parts of the eastern Pacific exceeding 1 degree below average. And that was considered a strong La Nina right there, and that's why we ended up getting so many hurricanes back in 2020. That's why we ended up getting over pretty much just getting rid of the Greek alphabet. We had 30 named systems from that whole thing, primarily because of the La Nina right there. So that's what we're potentially looking at right here as this thing really transitions. And by June, it really kicks in, with some anomalies getting down in parts of the Central Pacific over here, close to about 4 or even 5 degrees below average, which, based off of what we're seeing, we're looking at, and based off the projections that we're looking at from what we saw earlier right here, we're looking at a particularly strong La Nina if the CANSIPS model continues to hold. Now, I'm not 100% sure how strong the La Nina will be, but considering the fact that we're transitioning from the strongest El Nino to the weakest La Nina which was strongest El Nino back since 2015, to a relatively neutral and weak La Nina situation pretty much by the time summer kicks off. That's pretty disturbing right there. And we all remember in 2023 the active hurricane season we saw despite the El Nino going on. And then the La Nina really ramps up, and by September, we have pretty much below average temperatures through a lot of the La Nina area and much of the Pacific Ocean right there. And it continues through November into December, and what that La Nina will do is weaken the wind shear by a considerable rate. If we could pull, unfortunately we can't pull up the wind or anything like that. If we can, I wish we could find the wind shear anomalies, but we're gonna have to wait till hurricane season to do that. But if we go ahead and show you what we're potentially looking at right here, the temperature anomalies just are absolutely off the chain, to say at the very least right here, and the sea surface temperature anomalies just continue to get worse and worse as we continue to show you that. And the surface temperature anomalies in much of the Atlantic pretty much are about the same as where we were back in 2023, although if not a little cooler according to some of these climate models right here. If we go ahead and show you the CFS monthly right here, we can go ahead and show you what we're potentially looking at. Similar situation right there. It looks like the La Nina really starts kicking in around April or May right there, just in time for hurricane season, according to the latest runs in January right here. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to that, as those are going to weaken the trade winds and generally call for a more active hurricane season. But those are still two pieces of the equation. We still have a few pieces left to talk about. One of which is the potential dry air and this potential Sahara dust that's going to be a part of this. Well, we're going to go ahead and now go back to the North Atlantic right here and go ahead and pull up something I want to take a look at. Monthly total precip anomaly right here. This is pretty much how much more wet it is going to be than on average. That's pretty much what we're looking at right here. So here's what we have going on, and this is pretty much by the time we get to hurricane season, and already the CFS is forecasting for a much wetter main development region and a much wetter Caribbean sea than average for June, which that's going to cause some definite issues right there, especially considering that pretty much the biggest reason why we see a lot of systems start to bust in June is mainly, other than the wind shear, due to dry air. And with a lot of more precipitation coming around for a lot of these areas, that means there's a lot less dry air for this thing to work with. And considering how this whole thing plays out, we could be seeing some stuff really start to ramp up, maybe as early as July and early August as we continue to look at it. And this is expected to persist through much of the main development region, through much of the Caribbean Sea, and even into the Gulf of Mexico, according to the CFS. Now, if we go ahead and show you the CANSIPS model right here, it's a bit interesting right here as things really start to ramp up in the main development region, and mainly thanks to the Intertropical Convergence Zone over here, or ITCZ, starting around April or May as the ITCZ transitions from the southern hemisphere up into the northern hemisphere for hurricane season. And by the time we get to June over here, things really get interesting for much of the main development region and exceed all the way to the Caribbean Sea and all the way up to Florida and parts of the Gulf of Mexico, where we're not really seeing that many drier than average situations right here, according to these climate models, which is essentially meaning that there's going to be less dry air for this thing to work with, and potentially some more moisture for these things to organize and develop as they approach approach land over here. It gets particularly bad around July, August, and into September over here. As we reach peak hurricane season, we're seeing a lot wetter situation than we were on average right here. And that's going to be very key for how these things battle off the dry air, or what Sahara dust is going to be coming through. Now, the most unpredictable part of this is the Sahara dust. I do not know 100% what the Sahara dust is going to do. I'm not sure how wet the Sahel is going to be for that to happen. What we do know for a fact is we're looking at wetter than average precipitation, or greater than average precipitation across much of the Atlantic Ocean as we ramp into hurricane season. If we go ahead and compare that back to 2023 and what the CAMSIPS was forecasting before that, they were predicting a much drier situation for a lot of the area right here. And then it was this is where we were at this point last year over here. We were predicting a much drier than average main development region, or around average. This is where we are right now. Boom, for 2024. A lot more moisture to work with, and a lot less dry air to really stop this from happening. That, coupled with the La Nina, could cause some serious issues down the road. Now, the biggest part about this is how many named storms are there going to be, and what are we potentially looking at when it comes to activity. That is probably the most unpredictable of all of this. I know I said the Sahara dust was pretty unpredictable, but the fact that we're already seeing these anomalies, we're seeing this La Nina really start to kick into high gear around April and May, and the fact that we're going to be seeing, potentially according to some of the models that I was looking at in the previous month, the accumulative convective energy up to potentially 2 to 3 times greater than average from the main development region to the Caribbean Sea and to the Gulf of Mexico is quite scary, to say at the very least. Now, how many storms do I think there are going to be at this current time of January 21st, 2024? Personally, I would not rule out anything more than 20 named storms at this current point in time. The prediction I made back in 2023 for the hurricane season, once things really kicked into high gear, was 17 to 20 named storms, and we were right about on the money, give or take a couple things. But given the fact that this is going to be a completely new animal, given the fact that we're looking at a potentially much greater warm and much greater moisture anomaly than average, in the La Nina is transitioning, I would not be surprised if we crack 20 named storms. Now, don't take that as gospel or anything like that, but considering the fact that we're looking at a wetter than average season, a potentially the weakening of the trade winds, and global sea temperatures that are continuing to be much warmer than average. They're actually warmer now than at this point in 2023. If we go ahead and show you the graphic that we were looking at over here, they're still about 0.3 degrees Celsius warmer than they were at this point last year. And if that continues and then springtime comes and really warms it up, it's going to be very scary to potentially look at for what we're looking at down the road. But as of right now, I will say right now that I'm potentially looking at greater than 20 named storms at this current point in time. I'm not going to give a range prediction right now because of how far out this is, but given the fact that we're looking at all the factors that we talked about in this video, I would not be surprised if we broke that potentially by late September. But don't take what I said as gospel. Remember what you need to do. Follow your local agencies for further information. We will be making another forecast in about 3 months or so, around mid-April, just to see what we're looking at and what the latest model guidance is showing us. But with that being said, that was today's forecast. That was the big tropical forecast for 2024 that we just did. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And if you want to come hang out with us or see the behind the scenes and what we're thinking about with this hurricane season, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.